Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Salud America's webinar on 4 steps to start a school food pantry. I'm Rosalie Aguilar, Salud America's National Project Coordinator, and I want to thank you today for joining us. Today, we are very excited to have 2 of our very own Salud heroes of healthy change. We have Texas State Representative Diego Bernal of District 123 right here in San Antonio, Texas, who I'd like to welcome. And we also have Jenny Arredondo, who is a Senior Executive Director of Child Nutrition at San Antonio Independent School District. Before we begin, there are a few reminders I'd like to share. So throughout the webinar, all participants will be muted. If, however, you have any questions, please feel free to type these into our chat box or question box. And at the end of the presentation, we'll try to address as many of the questions as we can. And also, once the webinar is ended, you will receive a brief survey via email, so please take 5 minutes to share your feedback on this webinar. Today's webinar is the 3rd webinar in our Salud Hero series of community heroes who've worked to lead healthy change in their own community. So for those of you who are not too familiar with Salud America, Salud America is a national organization, and we are based here at UT Health San Antonio at the Medical Center and the Health Science Center. And we are a national network of over 200,000 followers that works to inspire groups and individuals like yourselves to support healthy change and for the health of Latino and all children through policies and systems change. We do this mainly by producing research, news updates, hero stories, and multimedia resources to help you participate in becoming a part of creating a culture of health and healthy environments where all kids and families can equitably live, learn, work, and play. We are under the direction of Dr. Amelie Ramirez, and as I mentioned, we're based here at the University of Texas Health San Antonio. So our agenda for today, we'll be introducing the issue of food insecurity and how this impacts students. We'll talk briefly on that, but then we'll go into why your school needs a school food pantry. We'll then be hearing some wonderful stories from State Representative Diego Bernal, who will be speaking about his experiences in determining the need for legislation around this issue. And then we'll hear from Jenny Arredondo as well. We'll hear her story and how she helped launch 10 food pantries across her school district. At the end of the presentation, we'll be introducing a new action pack that will be readily available for you to use at the end of the webinar. So we hope that you'll join us by signing up for the free action pack that will help you and provide step-by-step a guide of how to get started with a food pantry. So I'll begin introducing that a little bit later after we hear from our speakers. But first, let's talk a little bit about food insecurity. Food insecurity is a state of being without reliable access to sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food. Every day, children walk home from school when the last bell rings and often worry about where or how they will find their next meal. And oftentimes when the next morning rolls around, several of these kids go back to school hungry. In the US, 12.9% of the population is classified as food insecure. And this amounts to around 41 million Americans who struggle to put food on the table. In children, we know that 1 in 6 children may not know where they're getting their next meal from. So this is an issue that impacts us greatly on a national level, but even greater at a state level. So for those of you watching today from Texas, Texas is one of the 15 states with the highest food insecurity rates. So food insecurity here in Texas is 15.4%, and that is higher than the national rate. This map, as you see here, shows that Texas, among all the other states you see in red, are amongst the most food insecure households. And what are the effects of food insecurity? We know that this has a great impact on children. Not only is it impacting their state of nutrition, but it can also impact them in ways that affect them developmentally. So we know from a few studies that children ages 6 to 12 who are food insecure, this has been linked to things like not performing as well in mathematics, having absenteeism, tardiness, grade repetition, and then also things like anxiety, aggression, and various psychosocial dysfunctions that we see. We even see often some of these children having difficulty getting along with others. So it's greatly impacting our kids, and so it's definitely something we want to be able to address. So not only is it impacting our younger children, but food insecurity impacts our teenagers. Children between the ages of 15 and 16 in one study demonstrated mental health problems and also even suicide symptoms when the study looked at the impact of food insecurity. So these are things that really have some widespread consequences that we need to consider. Why does your school need a food pantry? Well, to talk a little bit more about this, we know that schools are a very important source of food for many children. So for many of these children living in poverty, it is the main source of food. And as you see here, our speaker, Jenny Arredondo, when we first interviewed her about this, mentioned that food insecurity does exist and hunger doesn't just stop when the bell rings. So it's definitely well recognized amongst our nutrition community that this is an issue. Fortunately, in Texas, in 2017, in September of 2017, we know that there was a new law that took effect. And this law allows schools to create their own school food pantry and then donate leftover foods to itself and allow for storage and redistribution. This is something that you'll be hearing more about from our state representative. And as a result of the legislation, schools can now organize their own food pantry. Again, accepting, storing, and redistributing food that's donated and left over from students. And this really provides a healthy snack for these children. And even for some, it provides a means of food to take home, leftover food to take home. So there are several benefits that come along with a school food pantry. Not only does it help fight hunger and food insecurity, but it's also helping to decrease food waste. So there are different types of food pantries. Two main types that we talk about in our action pack are the shared tables. Maybe some of you have this already in your schools, or maybe you've heard of these, but shared tables allow students to add non-perishable leftover foods on one or more shared tables. And then these shared tables can be located in the classroom or even in the cafeteria area where hungry students can go and access the food from these tables during or even often after mealtime. The second type of food pantry that exists is a food storage location in a classroom or in an office. So as you see here on the right side, this is one example of a food pantry at SAISD, and this is the type of food pantry where it's best to have a designated campus representative to distribute the food from the pantry to the students. We'll talk more about that, but campus representative can really be anybody from the school campus that's designated. You'll learn a little bit more about it in the action pack. So again, how a school food pantry helps. School food pantries allow for unwanted and untouched foods to be redirected to students who are hungry and in need. This also allows students to access nutritious food and take food home, and it reduces hunger. It promotes nutrition, decreases food insecurity, and prevents food waste. According to one study from Harvard, 60% of fresh vegetables and even 40% of fresh fruits are wasted. So this is something that by using this as an option, we can help reduce some of this food waste. Best part about this is it doesn't have to cost anything. So many schools already have the capabilities to be able to start a food pantry, and it really doesn't require a budget. It really requires just the desire to get started with something like this. So next on our agenda, we'll be hearing from our local state representative, who will talk a little bit about his story and why he saw the need to pursue legislation on this issue and how this new law impacts children in Texas. So I'd like to welcome State Representative Diego Bernal, and we'll have him turn on his webcam.
There. Hi.
Awesome. Hi, Diego.
Hi. Thanks for doing this. This is awesome. I always like when I can see it all in one place, because sometimes people communicate when we're trying to do better than we can. What I thought I would do is sort of tell you a little bit about how we came about this, why we decided to frame it the way that we framed it, and then of course I want to answer any questions that you have. But we're very interested in public education, and so we decided the best way to learn about schools and what are facing schools is to visit them. And we have 55 traditional public schools, about 16 charter schools, and 14 private schools in our district, which is the center. It's the center city of San Antonio. So think of downtown, go a little bit south, and go a little bit north, and that's our district. We have campuses from 3 different school districts, and these 3 districts aren't really alike. One is, by San Antonio standards, sort of middle class, one's upper middle class, and one is very, very much blue collar and poor. And so as we started our visits, we'd sit down with educators and say, tell me what I need to know. What could we do that would make your life better? What could we do that would make you have a better experience in the classroom and on the campus? And early on, maybe at our 4th or 5th visit, there was a principal at a school in a neighborhood I used to live in, who was an old friend of mine. I walked in the door and there she was, and so it made it easier for us to talk. And her and her staff created a chart, and the chart had a list of academic issues that they faced, and then a list of non-academic issues that affected academics. And food insecurity was the #1 thing on that list. And if, for those of us who are in this world, food insecurity is a fancy term for hunger. And I asked her to explain to me what that looked like and what that meant. And she talked about how you couldn't get students to focus, that their minds were somewhere else, that they were tired, and that especially from Friday to Monday, some of them weren't getting good food at all. And so they'd come back on Monday morning ravenous and just unable to focus. And so she then took me to the cafeteria and showed me how the cafeteria was forced to throw away hundreds of pounds of good food every week. We're talking wrapped granola bars, peel top cereal, oranges and apples. And it just didn't make any sense to me that you've got all this food in the cafeteria that's perfectly edible, a large group of students who need food, not just to survive, but also to learn, and that there was no mechanism to get that food to those students. And so we then set out the rest of the year trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And honestly, because of the intersection of local, state, and federal laws, it was very, very complicated. We didn't really have any inroads until we came across a federal law called the Good Samaritan Act, sorry. And the Good Samaritan Act is a law that allows schools to donate leftover food to nonprofits without real liability, as long as they follow health and safety codes. And so I thought, all right, here's a law that works in that allows donations, but what tends to happen is that those donations go to an organization, let's say a food bank, that takes them off campus and elsewhere. So we've got the donation part down, but that food isn't getting to the hungry kids on their campus. So when I think what the Student Fairness and Feeding Act is, it's really, we created a loophole. We created a workaround that allows the food that's donated to stay on campus by designating someone on campus as a third-party representative of a nonprofit. So they sort of take off their school hat and put on their nonprofit hat. And it could be a school employee, it could be someone from the PTA, it could be someone from the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or any other organization that's nonprofit. What that allows them to do is that person acting on behalf of that nonprofit is then eligible to receive, eligible to receive donations. And then the part of the law that we added was that we added the ability to store and keep that food on campus. And we also allow that food to be redistributed on campus. So we take care of the donation part, and then we take care of the distribution part. And that seems to work out best. I mean, that's, and then after that, we're trying to get people to donate the food, but also we're trying to get more schools to proliferate it. And that's, I think, a big part of Jenny's story, which is how do you do this in a certain school, and how do you do it in a way that we can spread across the state.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think we have one more slide here, here on the Student Fairness in Feeding Act.
Right. One thing about the slides that you showed that I thought was really interesting, and there's sort of a middle, it's kind of a middle slide. You had an example of a shared table where you can put food on the shared table and then kids can take it during mealtime, and then you have a proper food pantry that's a room or a closet. The way the law is written, there's also a sort of middle ground where you can have a shared table, and that shared table can last longer than the meal time. So you can have a shared table, let's say you put it in a hallway, and you can just keep food there during the duration of the day and even after school. The food pantry, yes, it can be a classroom, it can be a closet, but at one school in SAISD, they have an organization called City Year. These are City Year, if you're not familiar with City Year, City Year is a group of people who go and assist the school with learning and tutoring and extracurricular activities. It's sort of like an extra support group that is on campus. They put a lot of the food in the City Year office. So as kids go to the City Year office, there's granola bars, and there are peel top cereal and apples and oranges, and that works just as well. In other words, we wrote the law in such a way that it makes it easy to do. You're right, there's no cost, but we really want it to be as formal or informal as a campus wants to do it, because any version of this is a good version. We just want to make sure that it works out. So you're right, it can be very formal, or it can be super, super, super informal, and you can do that in a way that doesn't violate the four corners of the law. We've made it very, very broad. So we want to make that clear that the action pack is a beautiful idea because it helps people get started. We want people to know that not only is it low cost, but it can be done in a wildly low maintenance way.
Well, thank you so much, Diego. Thank you for giving priority to this issue and for really working to promote the health and well-being of our children. So, so now we're going to transition and hear a little bit from Jenny Arredondo. So we have her here with us today. We're going to, hello everybody. Here she is. Hopefully everyone can see. So she's going to talk a little bit about her experience with implementing food pantries as a result of this legislation.
So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. It's always a pleasure to be able to tell our story in SAISD. And as I sit here and I hear Representative Bernal speak, I kept wanting to say yes, 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 correct, true, and so on. We've had the pleasure in SAISD in the 17-18 school year to implement 10 pantries. And as I was explaining today, we have 6 on a waiting list that we plan on implementing for the upcoming school year. So it has been fairly easy to do. We really thought about it long and hard prior to rolling it out. Of course, our goal is always for them to be sustainable. And so we wanted to make sure that we rolled it out in such a fashion that they would be. We did consult early on with our local health department and really got our head around, so what are the items going to be? What is this really going to look like? Obviously, in our business, food safety is first and foremost for obvious reasons. So before we even began, we consulted with our own local health department. And then we started to put together our initial packet, if you will. We had some interested campuses. We hosted meetings. We talked a little bit about the legislation, rolled it out at a principals meeting. A lot of the success of the pantries is because we have a lot of buy-in from administration, all the way from the top, you know, from the board of trustees to superintendent to campus leaders. It takes a village, as they say. And so it seemed like once we got the buy-in and we really kind of got our head around what this really needs to look like, it really just rolled out very easily. Like Ms. Aguilar was saying, by the end of last school year, we had implemented 10 campus pantries. We are in the process of starting up 6 for the upcoming year. So we've had some success. We've heard some great success stories. You know, we hear kids are able to visit during the course of the day. They're able to get additional food items that they can either have later in the school day and or they can take home, mainly over the weekends, holidays, obviously when issues with food insecurity are a little bit more predominant. But again, it really has not been very difficult other than really just kind of strategically laying it out so that, number one, you just have a process in place, again, so that they sustain themselves and makes it that much easier. You know, this year, we kind of looked at last year more like a pilot. And so now that we have our arms around it and we have all of those tools in place, it makes it that much easier this upcoming school year. You know, we're still early in the process. You know, there's sometimes we have to revisit a certain process and maybe say, well, let's look at it this way, or let's change this, or let's add that. I think that's with anything. But we just have had really good reception from the campuses. Typically, once we've made that exchange and we've made that donation, it becomes a function of the campus and that point of contact, whoever that liaison is for the campus. I think child nutrition programs work really closely with the schools, but I would always say that campus staff will know their student body much more than a child nutrition employee or staff would. So it's really just working hand in hand, visiting, talking best practices, what's working, what's not working. Obviously, in a child nutrition program, something that is also very important is we just want to always make sure that our program guidelines are met. You know, our agencies are obviously the Texas Department of Agriculture as well as the United States Department of Agriculture. And so with the way the legislation was written and with our program guidelines, it really has been, it hasn't been very difficult. I think it is very attainable if it's something that you're really interested in. I would certainly get the message out, educate, host meetings, talk to principals. There's probably a lot of people on campus that would be interested in helping out if the message was out there. So I would always advocate for pantries. We've really seen the success. I've been able to see firsthand students benefit from having a campus pantry. And so in our district, our demographics, we have a very high percent of economically disadvantaged students. So in a district like ours, we looked at it as an opportunity. I heard Diego mention a loophole. Absolutely, you know, we run with it, because if there's ever an opportunity that we can step in and help our students, we're always going to do that. So again, we do have some things we have to work on. It's always a work in progress, but it's certainly moving it forward, and it's an initiative that will continue in SAISD. And again, we've seen great success with our program.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks so much for sharing your story. I know your stories certainly inspired us at Salud America, and we've really felt that this is something, both of your stories, that we were so inspired by that we decided we would create an action pack around this topic so that others could also get involved with bringing a school food pantry to their own school. So kind of taking the steps that you've already gone and implemented and learning from your approach, Jenny, this is why we decided we would go ahead and create this action pack. And Diego, also your story I think is very important, because we need more legislators stepping up to work for health as a priority for children. And this is just a great example of this. So we're very excited now to tell you a little bit about the Salud America Action Pack, which we've put together as a result of the wonderful example of these two amazing Salud heroes. And you can access this action pack yourself. So I've included a link here that you can go to, and the action pack is now available to any of you who are interested. So I encourage you to visit this link and also share it with your colleagues. And all you have to do is go here, sign up with your email, and in just 1 hour you will receive an email with the action pack. And you'll also see Stacy Cantu, she's one of our Salud America curators. You'll be getting emails from her so that you can continue to move forward with this process of starting an action pack. Starting a food pantry in your school. So the action pack is broken down into 4 simple steps that you can participate in. As you see here, we've broken it down very easily for you to begin to start that conversation. As Jenny mentioned, it's important to get buy-in from administration, from your school principal, from your superintendent, and even from your food services director at the district level. It's great to have their buy-in. And then we also want to help you build support. So gathering support from your colleagues, from your teachers and school counselors, social workers at the school level, even parents who are volunteering through the PTA, anyone can be involved. So just to elaborate a little bit more on these steps, the first step is in the action pack, you will receive model emails. So you can easily copy these emails and tailor it with your district leaders' names. And you can send these emails to either, we have one tailored specifically for the superintendent, another for nutrition coordinators, and then another one for principals. We've also given you some FAQs. So these are frequently asked questions that you might get about the school food pantry. We've aimed to provide this as a resource for you to understand more about the logistics behind starting a school food pantry. We've also included talking points. So these talking points will make it much more easier for you to have this conversation with decision makers. And then, of course, our wonderful case studies on the work that State Representative Diego Bernal and Jenny Arredondo did to make this possible in schools here in San Antonio. And so, so these are great ways to begin building your case and starting the conversation around this at your school. The second step is all about building support for your school food pantry. So with step 2 of our action pack, you will be able to print out or email a handout that we've created for you. And then we've also created another email that you can use as a model to get more key influencers involved. We've even created a PowerPoint that you can use if you feel that this is something you'd like to present at perhaps you have a certain committee that you're involved with, or a SHAC, a School Health Advisory Council, or even as part of the PTA. This is a great PowerPoint presentation that you can use, and you can customize it with your own school's information, logo, whatever you'd like to make this more tailored to your audience. Another thing in here is a letter support campaign. So this is a great way to drive action, to drive people to be interested in this and to see that others are interested in this as well. So this is a web page that we will provide for you, and it will allow you to generate more support as you continue to move forward with this plan. The third step is going and planning and implementing this school food pantry. So you can use Salud America's quick guide on certain key actions that you might need to take in order to begin the process. And then you'll have access also to some real templates that San Antonio ISD uses for their school food pantry. So we appreciate Jenny Arredondo and appreciate the leadership that she's provided there, and we feel that these can be used as a model for some of the process and some of the logistics that go along with beginning a school food pantry. Finally, the fourth step is all about promoting this, getting the word out, having students be aware that this is available to them, having others in the school campus know, individuals working with the school system, have them also know that this is available, especially if they can identify children who really do need support. I mean, this is one great resource to point students to once it's available. So so we've created a sign so that you can place that on your school food pantry or your shared table if that's the route that you decide to go, and you can make it very visible to all the students. The final thing that we've included are some model social media messages that you can use to also promote this. It might maybe on Facebook if you have any Facebook communities that you're a part of through your school. So, and it's also great to have others know that your school is doing this, because in other schools will perhaps want to join in as well and create their own school food pantries. So again, in the action pack, you'll have access to this. Perhaps many of you have more questions on, you know, some of the things that you might need to do. We talk a little bit about that in our action pack. We talk about, you know, having someone who has a food handler's license is kind of one of the important things. And there are other procedures detailed in the action pack, which you will have access to. And then once you've started with your school food pantry, we'd love to hear back from you. We'd love to hear how you're doing and what success you've had, how you're working to promote it. We'd love to share your story with others, with our 200,000 network follower, and inspire others to become Latino health advocates. So again, thank you for joining this. And I will leave you with this quote from Mother Teresa. And she says, "Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest to you." So this is something that you can get started with this school year. We hope you'll take that opportunity. And we appreciate you joining us today. So now we have a little bit of time for some questions. If anybody has questions to ask Jenny, Diego, or myself, we can definitely work to address those or try answering your questions. Got a few questions here. Feel free to type these into our question box or the chat box. And so we have someone, actually it's more of a comment, but thank you for starting. I'm super excited about starting this in our community. Thank you for this. I know many students can benefit from a program such as this. So thank you for that comment. Any other questions? We can take those right now. Okay. Can we solicit to outside for donation to food pantry? That's a good question. I think there are different forms of food pantries, and some of this is addressed in our action pack. So the food pantry that we are discussing today is primarily using food that is donated through the school district. Maybe Jenny can speak a little bit more to this and address this question, but there are different forms of food pantries where I know even food banks can be involved. So maybe Jenny, if you'd like to speak a little bit more on this.
Sure. One of the ways that I've described food pantries as our journey and we've progressed is oftentimes our startup kit and our efforts can, you know, possibly be viewed as, like, say, the platform. We do have some responsibilities to our agencies in regards to inventory and so forth. So it's a pantry is a great opportunity for a child nutrition program to be able to funnel any of those foods that otherwise cannot be, you know, reserved and so forth. But in our district, we do have relationships with other entities, for example, our own local food banks. So I know campuses, again, in our district, food pantries do have the capability to receive donations from child nutrition program, but also other agencies such as those mentioned.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have another question here. Let's see. We have, how does one find out if laws allow for school food pantries in a specific state? So this is a good question maybe for Diego. How does one find out if laws allow for school food pantries in a specific state?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I would imagine that the best place to start would be with organizations like yours or counterparts like yours in other states, because it's almost always that the advocates know more than uh, any particular school or district or even governmental entity. Even though they're responsible for the knowledge, they often don't have it. But the advocates always know everything. They know the entire landscape. And so I would find either a food bank or a food insecurity advocacy group, or a group like yours that focuses on the intersection of nutrition, health, and education. Find those folks in other states, and I am 99% sure that they either have the answer or they know who has the answer, and that's always a good place to start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diego. Yes, I would second Diego's comment and definitely add that part of the wonderful thing about this action pack is that Salud America, we want to be there. We want to be available for you throughout this journey. We are there to help you and to answer any questions like this that you might have. If we haven't addressed something in our action pack, we have a team of curators that can go and find an answer for you. And we are connected to several national organizations as well as state level organizations and advocates. And so this is an opportunity for us to work with you. We're happy to do that. We're excited to provide any kind of assistance like this that you might need. And again, if we can't answer that question, we will look for somebody that can answer that question for you, that can help you with some of the challenges that you might encounter. So this is great. We have another question. How do you determine which students are in need of food because they don't have any access at home on a daily basis or weekend time frame versus students who receive reduced price meals at our schools? That's, I think, I don't know if Jenny, if you have an answer to that, but I think, you know, different people can be involved in that. I think it takes more than just the nutrition department.
Yeah, and typically in our situation, so once the donations have been made by the Child Nutrition Program to the actual food pantry, that's when we kind of relinquish that responsibility to the campus. Oftentimes it's a campus employee, for example, a counselor or someone that's involved that knows their families and knows their participants. And at that point, we kind of let that person be the judge of that, mainly because they're in tune with the student body and know a little bit more about the home dynamics and what their issues are rather than cafeteria staff.
Great. For those of you wondering if you'll be able to access these slides, yes, we will be posting these slides to our YouTube page once the webinar is ended. It'll take a couple of days, but we'll get that up there. And then also, I think we had another question about an individual's asking about a recent case in the news of a young student denied access to lunch due to lack of money. And he's asking how we can address this, how at a state level, is there anything we can do to address
The answer to that one is yes. In legislation, that phenomenon is called food shaming, and it happens in some cases where a student gets to the end of the line, discovers they don't have money on their card, and either the lunch is taken away, and they're given a paltry lunch, or they're not given lunch at all. Texas actually has a pretty progressive food shaming bill, a piece of legislation that requires that a student is still given the proper hot meal, and then steps are taken by the school to either reach out to the parents to have that lunch card filled, or just to give the student the meal and then figure the money out later. But we have a pretty good, maybe not best, but we have a pretty good food shaming bill. In fact, the second half of my bill has a food shaming element, but we passed another bill by Representative Giddings that, and I'll email you over the bill number, but Texas does have what's called a food shaming bill to deal with this exact issue. Because something like it happened in Texas about a year and a half ago, now it's happening somewhere else and they need to do the same thing. So there is a model food shaming bill that they can adopt at those states, but Texas educators should know that we have one here. And so the phenomenon of a kid getting a hot lunch or breakfast, getting all the way to the lunch line, discovering they don't have the funds to pay for it, that next part where they take that meal away and replace it with something paltry or nothing at all, that shouldn't happen anymore. We have that law, it's new, but we were successful in passing it.
Great, thank you so much for taking that question, Diego. So we have another question here about food drives and some schools that organize food drives and collect canned foods and packaged foods, and if these can be used in the food pantry. Is this something that you've encountered, Jenny, perhaps?
We have heard about some drives and things like that. I think what from our world, what's comforting is that all of our campus pantry liaisons have a food handler's license. And what that does is it really gives them some awareness as far as the integrity of items that we're receiving into pantries. Again, food safety is huge in our world. So, obviously canned goods do not present any type of, food safety concerns or issues. And we are as a child nutrition program, we're very detailed in what we will and will not donate, but we still try to give the pantry liaison some perspective as far as what items they should be receiving in, reputable sources, and making sure that the items are non-perishable and so forth. So just some guidance, I guess.
Great. A couple of more questions. Where do most of the donations come from? The leftover cafeteria food. So I think yes, for the most part, as we discussed briefly, Jenny discussed, and you'll see it in our action pack. There are certain examples of the types of food that is donated. So it's not all the school food. There are certain foods. Jenny, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on this.
Yeah, and this goes back to the onset of the pantries and consulting with our own local health department. And in our district, we have kept it to non-perishable and uncut whole pieces of fruit for obvious reasons. With that being said, really what we're doing is we're avoiding any type of food that would require refrigeration and or heat for obvious reasons. The goal is to put food in the hand of a student that can either put that in a backpack and take it home. But again, food safety, and I know, I've said that a lot of times, but we all know how important and serious of an issue that could present. So although the number of items might be limited, we're very confident that there are items that are safe that would not present any of those illnesses, but yet would provide some nutrition that students may not otherwise have.
Excellent. Great question. So I think that's about all the time that we have for questions today. Thank you both to State Representative Diego Bernal and to Jenny Arredondo from San Antonio Independent School District. I really do appreciate the time that they've taken to be a part of this and to help us in preparing the materials for the action pack that you will now have access to. Again, questions like where to get a food handler's license, you can find answers to that in our action pack. You can find examples of the type of foods that SAISD is be able to donate and use as part of their food pantry. That's all in the action pack. There are templates, again, that you can use to work with your district nutrition coordinator and even just examples of, I know there's a template where people can sign in the food, report the food that's being brought into the food pantry, and then food that's being given out to students. It's all logged. So there are great ways to go about this. And I think SAISD's done a wonderful job of organizing some of the logistics behind this. So again, we encourage you to go out there if you are considering this, if you are thinking about something like this. If you have questions, feel free to contact us. Our information is available on the slides, as you can see here. Our website, salud-america.org. The food pantry website is salud.to/get-a-pantry. And then you can feel free to email us, salutamerica@uthcsa.edu. We're also very active on social media. So if you have a Twitter account, feel free to send us a tweet. If you have a Facebook account, we're also responsive to those messages. So again, thank you for your time today. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We look forward to connecting with you, and we look forward to hearing great things from you. So thanks again, and until next time, bye-bye.